AITA for refusing to fund my ex's stepkids after she promised her husband my money? 8 years ago, my ex Brianna and I separated right after the birth of our twins. We had not even been together for very long, about 14 months, when she found out she was pregnant. We both panicked a bit and figured maybe we should try to make things work for the sake of the kids. You know how it goes. Sometimes you tell yourself a relationship will eventually fall into place on its own because there is a family to build. I admit we were not really compatible from the start. We had good times, of course, but it was not that deep, lasting connection. Still, when she got pregnant, I figured maybe we could hold on and make it work. We were as compatible as oil and water. But for the twins, we really tried. For a while, it was okay. There were arguments, like in all couples, but nothing dramatic. We co-parented fairly well and were not constantly clashing. Then she met someone else, someone she thought she could build a future with. I get it. She wanted a fresh start, something different from what we had. She was honest about it, and we both agreed that splitting up was the best solution. I cannot say I was heartbroken because honestly our relationship was not really solid. But we separated quite amicably for a breakup anyway. After that, we found a rhythm for co-parenting. Everything went fine, or as fine as possible, when two people raise kids from two different households in the same suburban area. We shared time quite equally through our joint custody arrangement. We communicated mostly about the kids and frankly, we co-parented quite decently. We both wanted to make sure the twins were not affected by any tension. So we made a real effort. The kids spent time with both of us, and there was no child support since everything was split equally under our agreement. Then about 2 years after our split, Brianna met the man who is now her husband. It was not the guy she started dating right after our breakup, but someone new. And here is the important detail. He had a daughter the same age as our twins. She told me about him and the fact that their relationship was getting serious. And yes, I wanted to support that to make things easier for the kids. I was okay with the idea of them having another father figure in their lives. But things started to change when she brought up the idea of including her stepdaughter the exact same way we included our twins in everything. She threw it out there almost casually, like it would be nice if we did everything as one big family. At first, it seemed innocent enough. I thought she was just trying to blend the families. But it got a bit weird when she started suggesting I treat her stepdaughter like my own child. Let me be clear, I have nothing against her stepdaughter. She is just a kid caught in the middle of all this. But Brianna seemed to think that simply because we were all tied together by the twins, I was somehow obligated to make her stepdaughter an integral part of every activity, every outing I planned with my kids. When we first talked about it, I explained to her that I understood her desire to include everyone, but it was not my place to play dad to her new husband's child. I already had my hands full being a good father to my twins, but she kept pushing. I tried not to let frustration get the better of me. Co-parenting is tricky. You try to meet your family's needs while keeping the peace with an ex and their new partner. But the expectations kept growing. Things really took a turn when she started expecting me to look after her stepdaughter every time I had my twins. For example, if I planned a weekend activity with my kids, she would call to ask if I could bring her stepdaughter along too. I did not mind occasionally, but it became a permanent expectation. And let's be clear, I have no problem helping out now and then, but I never agreed to be a third parent to her husband's kid. Honestly, I did not see how it was fair, neither to me nor even to my own kids. Over time, I realized that every time I planned something special for my twins, it always ended up becoming an issue about the other children in her household. It felt like I was no longer allowed to spend time just with my own kids. And when I bought gifts or organized a little surprise, I would hear that it was not fair if her stepdaughter was not included the same way. Once, she even got upset because I did not spend as much on a gift for her stepdaughter as I did for our twins. I had to draw a line. I decided to focus my time and resources on my twins. I explained it to her, and, unsurprisingly, she took it very badly. She said I was selfish and unsupportive of her whole family. She wanted this big, blended family, but that was not something I signed up for. I told her I wanted my twins to feel like they belonged, but that did not mean I had to support kids who were not mine in the same way. She was not happy, but we managed to stay cordial enough to keep co-parenting. Since that conversation, we do more parallel parenting than co-parenting, if that makes sense. We each handle our time with the kids on our own, and we rarely do things together as a big family. We do not share our plans, and we do not mix the kids from her household with mine. It simplifies things, and for me, it allows me to focus on my kids without all those extra expectations. Even so, from time to time, she brings it up again as if I should feel guilty for not participating in the upbringing of all the kids under her roof. Over the years, the situation in her family got more and more complicated. She and her husband had a child together. Then they took in her husband's nephew. So now, at her place, there are my twins, their stepsister, a step-cousin, and a half-sister. Brianna tries to make all these people one big happy family. But I have been clear, my role is about my kids, and only them. Yes, it is complicated. Every time I think the situation is finally stable, there is something new. But I have maintained my boundaries, and I do not think it is unreasonable to focus on the two kids who are actually mine. It is one thing to support her decisions as a mother, but it is another to be expected to play parent to all the kids in her household. Anyway, let us fast forward a bit, and here is when things really started to go off the rails. Over the years, with the arrival of new members in Brianna's household, it became increasingly difficult to maintain clear boundaries. At first, we had found a certain balance. I did my part as a father without being involved in her new family life. But her expectations kept rising, and it felt like every few months, there was something new she expected me to help with. Her stepdaughter, her husband's nephew, their baby together, it was as if they kept adding extra layers, and somehow I was supposed to shoulder part of it. Then came this whole school field trip issue. The elementary school the twins attend is quite small, which means there are mixed grade classes. It also means they are in the same class as their stepsister and stepcousin, which up to that point makes sense. It is a bit unusual, but it works for the school, and it does not bother me. However, what I did not expect was for it to become a whole big deal with their mother and stepfather about what I was supposed to pay for. This trip is very important for the kids. It is not just a simple little school outing. It is a visit to an interactive science museum that is supposed to be amazing. The school planned for the kids to learn a lot of things hands-on with organized workshops. It is expensive, no doubt about it. But my twins were super excited, and it seemed like the kind of experience that would leave great memories. I can afford the cost. So I figured why not. I paid for them. I mentioned it to Brianna, thinking she would just be happy the twins got to have this experience. Not at all. As soon as I mentioned I was paying, she got weirdly quiet. Then she outright said that if the other kids could not go too, it was not fair. At first, I thought she was joking. I figured there was no way she actually expected me to pay for the other two as well. But no, she was completely serious. She started saying it was not right for our kids to go on this fancy trip if those other kids could not go too. I tried to stay calm. I explained to her that I was paying for my twins to go because it is my responsibility. I even suggested that maybe she and her husband could do a fundraiser or save up for the other kids if it was so important to them. But then she hit me with, "You have to think about how they will feel seeing your kids go on a trip while they stay behind." Apparently, their whole household was going to fall apart if all the kids did not have the exact same experiences. And that is when the discussion got really tense. Her husband chimed in, saying it was unfair to treat the children differently. I am all for fairness, but there is still a limit. His daughter and nephew are not my responsibility, and I am not made of money. I asked him point blank, why is it my job to pay for all the kids in your house? And he looked at me like I was the selfish one. He even launched into a speech about how they are all supposed to be siblings and that I was sabotaging their family. Look, I understand no kid likes to feel left out, but at some point, you also have to understand I am not their father. Brianna chose to take in these other kids, and she now has a whole new family setup. That is her choice, and I am not going to let myself be guilt-tripped into paying for every child she takes under her roof. What really set me off was when they started making me out to be someone cruel. They talked about the impact it would have on the relationships between the kids, and said it would be my fault if our twins and their step-siblings grew apart because of this. Honestly, that is nonsense. I am just a dad trying to do something nice for his kids, and it turns into family drama over what I am not doing for kids who are not even mine. So I said, look, I do not think it is fair to expect me to cover everyone's expenses. This trip is a gift for our twins. It takes place during my time with them, and I want them to go. I do not see how that is unfair to anyone. But Brianna kept going, saying that if our twins went and the other kids could not, they would feel treated like second-class citizens, and I should care about that. Her husband even brought up family unity, saying that if the kids ended up having issues with each other, it would be my fault. At that point, honestly, I was just fed up. This is not about family unity. It is them trying to turn their financial choice into my problem. And it is not even like they are struggling to get by. They have decent jobs, and if this trip really mattered that much, they could figure something out without relying on me. It is not up to me to stretch my finances to make up for what they cannot or will not do. The discussion was going in circles. They kept repeating that it was unfair and that I needed to think about the family, but I stood my ground. I told them it was not my fault if they could not send the other kids, and that I would not be guilt-tripped into paying. That is where the argument stopped, but from the look on her face, I could tell it was not over. Frankly, I left there feeling both annoyed and confused. I felt like no matter how many times I explained I was not responsible for all the kids in her family, they refused to hear it. Somehow, my focus on my own kids had become a problem, and I was being painted as the villain in their family story. It is exhausting. I just wanted to do something nice for my twins, and now it had become a huge debate about fairness and unity. I feel like I am walking a tightrope where every little decision can trigger a new argument. All I wanted was to provide a fun experience for my kids, but apparently that is too much to ask. Anyway, after that whole argument over the field trip, I thought that would be the end of it, at least for a while. I thought I had made it clear that I was not paying for all the kids, and I hoped Brianna and her husband would let it go. But no, they clearly had no intention of leaving it at that. I did not expect what came next, and honestly, it completely caught me off guard. A few days after the argument about the trip, I get a text from Brianna telling me she wants us to meet up to talk. I knew it would not be a friendly coffee, but I figured it was better to get it over with than to keep fighting over text. I agreed, and we arranged to meet at a local diner halfway between our neighborhoods. She arrives, and right away I can tell this will not be a quick chat. She has this serious look, the kind that shows she rehearsed what she is going to say. She sits down and jumps right in with, "I don't think you understand the situation." And I am thinking, yes, I understand perfectly. I pay for my kids, period. But I let her speak. She then launches into a whole speech about how I need to look at the big picture and that it is not just about a school trip. It is, according to her, about setting some sort of standard for how we will handle things in the future. I guess she thinks that if she frames it as a grand family philosophy, I will feel obligated to agree. She starts saying this trip is just one example and that in the future, there will be other activities, other events, maybe even family vacations, and that we should be on the same page about treating all the children equally. I could not believe it. I was thinking, wait, is she seriously suggesting that I now pay for family vacations for all these kids? But I just kept listening, trying not to overreact because I knew that if I got angry, it would only make things worse. Then she brings up the fairness argument again. She says that if my kids get to have this kind of experience and the others do not, it will breed resentment. They will feel left out. She even goes as far as to say that it could damage the relationships between the kids, that they would grow up with this sense of inequality that would eventually tear them apart. And I am sitting there thinking that they are already different kids, from different families with different lives. Why is it suddenly my job to fix this problem? When she finishes, I try to keep a calm tone and tell her I understand she wants all the kids to feel equal, but they are not my kids. They are not my responsibility. I remind her that we have been parallel parenting for a while now. She handles things on her end, and I handle mine. But apparently, she decided that was not enough anymore, and that is when she drops the real bombshell. She tells me, if you truly cared about the kids' well-being, you would want to support the whole family, not just your kids. She went on to say that I needed to show good faith by taking care of the other kids too. I almost burst out laughing. It sounded so absurd to me. Since when does supporting these kids mean funding everyone? At that point, I felt I was starting to lose my patience a bit. I told her, look, I care about my kids' well-being. That is exactly why I am willing to do these kinds of things for them. But I am not going to let myself be guilt-tripped into paying for kids who are not mine. She did not like that at all. She got defensive, saying I was selfish and not thinking about the long-term impact on the kids. I fired back. How is it selfish to simply take care of my own kids? You are the one who chose to add these other kids to your household. That is not my problem. And then her husband showed up. Yes, I do not know if she planned for him to conveniently drop by, but suddenly he was there walking up to our table. He barely acknowledged me, and went straight to Brianna, as if he was going to play the savior. He sat down and started attacking me like he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. He said, "I don't think you are being fair. We are supposed to be building a family, and your actions are putting up walls." I looked at him for a second, wondering if he really thought I was going to buy into this "we are all one family" speech when it came to my money. So, I answered him bluntly, "I am here to support my twins. That is what I signed up for. You cannot expect me to pretend all these other kids are financially mine." And then he hit me with, "Well, if the kids end up having issues with each other, it will be your fault. You are the one creating division." That is when I lost my temper. I told him, "You are the ones trying to force me to play dad to kids who are not mine. I am not the one complicating things. I just want to do right by my twins, and that is it." That he found me cold no longer bothered me. At this stage, I felt like they were both trying to gang up on me and make me look like the bad guy simply because I had boundaries. Things got pretty tense after that. Brianna started saying that if the kids grew up having issues with each other, it would be entirely my fault because I had not sufficiently supported their vision of the family. I could not believe what I was hearing. I replied that in that case, maybe she and her husband should figure something out themselves, but it was not on me to carry everything. By then, the people in the diner were clearly staring at us, and honestly, I did not care. I was sick of being painted as the villain of this story. I just wanted to do something nice for my kids, and it had turned into a massive mess about what I owed her household. It was like they expected me to blindly fund whatever came up for every kid under their roof, simply because they had decided to blend their family. Finally, I stood up and said, "Look, I have said what I had to say. My priority is my twins, and that will not change. If you want everything to be equal, maybe you should look at what you are doing rather than what I am doing. I am done being the bad guy in this story." And with that, I left, torn between frustration and relief. It was clear to me that no matter what I said, they would not understand. As I walked away, I could still feel them staring at me, as if they were waiting for me to cave and agree to their terms. But at that point, it was over. I had set my boundaries, and I was not going to let them push me into doing something I never agreed to. It is one thing to want these kids to feel like part of a family, but it is quite another to expect someone else to pay the price for it. Anyway, after that disaster of a diner conversation, I thought things would finally settle down. I figured Brianna and her husband would get the message, let it go, and move on. But I should have known better. The story did not end there. In fact, it got worse. A few days later, I started getting long texts from her family members. It started with her sister, who is usually pretty chill and had always stayed out of our issues. But suddenly, she was texting me to explain how important it was for the kids to feel like part of one big family. She said things like, "If you really cared about your children's happiness, you would agree to do this for them." It felt like she was implying I was doing something wrong just because I did not want to pay for her sister's stepkids. I tried to ignore it, thinking she would eventually drop it, but the messages kept coming and it got increasingly unpleasant. We went from thinly veiled suggestions to outright accusations. Suddenly, I was selfish, cheap, incapable of seeing the big picture. They really made it sound like I was destroying a big happy family simply because I refused to fund a trip for a few kids who are not mine. Her family was acting like I had declared war on them, just because I set a boundary. And then it got even worse. Brianna's mother decided to call me. I had not spoken to her in a while and was quite surprised to see her name pop up. I thought maybe she wanted to talk about the twins, have a calm chat. But no. This call was something else entirely. She immediately launched into a long speech about how things should be. She told me, "If you just paid for all the children, there would be no problem. You should think about how much better everything would be if you got more involved with all the kids." I felt my patience crumbling fast. I told her, with all due respect, those children were not my responsibility. I do what I must for my own kids, and that is what I committed to. But she kept going, saying things like, "A good man steps up and takes care of the whole family, not just his own kids." I was dumbfounded. I tried to explain to her that while I wanted the best for my twins, that did not mean I had to financially support every child her daughter decided to bring under her roof. I told her, "Look, I am not going to feel guilty for taking care of my kids and setting boundaries." But it was as if she was not even listening. The conversation went completely off the rails from there. She kept repeating herself, talking about my duty as a father and saying the kids were the ones who would suffer. And yes, she played the guilt trip card to the max. By the end of the call, I had had enough. I told her we clearly disagreed on this point and politely ended the conversation. But the pressure did not stop there. Over the following week, it felt like they were turning the whole family against me. Brianna's brother even left a comment on one of my social media posts about being a dad. A comment dripping with passive aggressiveness. He wrote, "Real fathers support their family, no matter what." It was obvious he was not just talking about my kids. I did not even reply. I just deleted the comment and moved on. But I will not lie, it annoyed me. I am doing my best for my twins, and somehow that makes me the bad guy in their eyes. One day, while dropping the kids off at Brianna's house, as I was walking back to my car, her husband caught up to me. He did not say hello, no pleasantries. He got straight to the point, saying, "You know you are hurting the kids with all this." Honestly, I was caught off guard. I thought we had already settled this, but clearly he was not done. He started talking about how my decision not to pay for all the kids was creating a rift between the siblings and that I needed to be more mindful of the family dynamic. I replied, "Look, I am not hurting anyone. I am taking care of my kids. They are not the ones suffering here." But he would not hear of it. He kept saying that the whole family thought I was being unfair and that it was only a matter of time before the kids felt it and started having issues with each other. I felt like he was trying to put the entire weight of their family's happiness on my shoulders, and I was not having it. I told him, "Your family's opinion changes nothing about my responsibilities. I am not their father. I am here for my kids, and that will not change." And honestly, at that point, I did not even know what else to add. It was like no matter what I did, they were going to keep seeing me as the villain in their little family story. That night, I sat at home in my living room, trying to figure out how we got here. All I wanted was to take care of my kids, give them great experiences, and here I am being portrayed as a heartless guy who does not care about family unity. They seemed incapable of telling the difference between what is fair and what is not. I ended up confiding in a few close friends. They could not believe the pressure Brianna's family was putting on me. One of them even joked that if he was so worried about seeing the kids miss out, he should just chip in and fund the trip himself. That made me laugh, but at the same time, it was frustrating because it really felt like her whole family had decided I was obligated to be a full-on parent to a bunch of kids who are not mine. And why? Just to keep a fake peace with people who clearly did not respect my boundaries. This whole thing left a bitter taste in my mouth. I was getting messages and calls from random family members, all repeating the same speech, and I was really fed up with it. It seemed like they got it into their heads that I owed them something, and they were not going to let it go until I gave in. By the end of that week, I realized trying to reason with them was useless. They were not looking for an explanation. They wanted me to fall in line. I decided I was not going to let them muzzle me. My kids are my responsibility, and I was not going to let this family guilt trip change that. It is crazy to think this all started simply because I wanted to pay for my kids' field trip. And now, it had become a battle over who was doing enough for the whole family. They might not like it, but I know where I stand. After that week of relentless texts, friendly advice, and guilt-tripping from Brianna's family, I decided I had to firmly establish my boundaries once and for all and stick to them with no exceptions, because at this point, I had had enough. It was clear to me that no matter how many times I explained myself, they would not understand. They were all focused on this idea of a big happy family, and apparently, I was the one standing in their way by refusing to pay for every extra kid they added to their household. So, first things first, I brought up the upcoming trip with my twins. I wanted to make sure they were still excited and did not feel uncomfortable because of all this, because after all the drama, I did not want them feeling guilty or responsible for anything. I kept it simple. I told them I was really looking forward to them going on the trip and that it was something special just for the two of them. I obviously did not go into the messy details, but I wanted them to know they were allowed to enjoy something meant only for them. Both of them looked relieved. They had clearly sensed some tension. Kids always pick up on that kind of thing, but they seemed happy and really eager to go. I could tell they did not feel guilty, and that lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. I needed them to know they deserved great experiences without having to feel responsible for anyone else. Once that was handled, I knew I had to set clear boundaries with Brianna and her family. And not just a vague boundary like, I only pay for my kids, but a real line they would understand as uncrossable. So I called her. I stayed calm and direct because I did not want it turning into another endless argument. I simply told her, "Look, my role as a parent is to support my twins. I am here for them, and I do what I can to give them good experiences. But that does not extend to the other children who are not mine. I respect your choices and your family, but my financial responsibility ends with our twins." Obviously, Brianna did not appreciate that. She immediately started talking again about how the other kids would feel and how it is not fair for siblings to have different experiences. I let her speak, but when she started trying to guilt me again, I stopped her. I told her I understood her point of view, but this was my final decision. I am not paying any extra expenses outside of those for our twins. I told her that if she wanted to figure something out for her household, that was up to her, but she needed to stop putting this pressure on me. There were a few seconds of silence, and I could feel she was seething with anger, but I had no intention of caving. I could almost feel her gearing up for one last maneuver, but she must have realized it was not going anywhere. She finally said something like, "Fine, I guess you made your choice," in a tone clearly meant to make me feel guilty. But it did not. Honestly, at that moment, I mostly felt relief. I was done justifying myself. After that, everything calmed down. No more random texts from her family members, no more passive-aggressive comments. Just silence. And yes, it was a bit awkward, but it felt good to finally have some peace. I think they eventually realized I would not bend to their demands, and they just had to accept it. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I made sure to spend a little extra time with the twins doing simple things to keep everything feeling normal. We picked up some burgers, went to the neighborhood park, watched movies at home, all those everyday things. I wanted them to feel secure, happy, and not caught up in the adult issues around them. And honestly, it was refreshing to be able to focus on them without all the extra drama. Then finally, the day of the trip arrived. I dropped them off at school that morning, and they were grinning from ear to ear, ready to go. It made me so happy to see them so excited after everything that had happened. As they ran off to join their friends, I felt a real sense of satisfaction, like a feeling of, there, this is exactly it. It is not about making everyone happy or bending over backward for people who do not appreciate anything. It is about giving the best to my kids and teaching them that it is okay to set boundaries. But here comes the plot twist, and I know I said I would not use that word, but bear with me. The day after the trip, I got a call from Brianna. I was expecting a bitter remark or a passive-aggressive jab, but instead, she simply asked if the kids had a good time. I told her yes and kept it brief because I did not want to dive back into old conflicts. And then she surprised me. She genuinely thanked me for sticking to what I thought was right. She said, "I didn't agree with you, but I respect that you stood your ground and stood up for your kids." I think I needed to hear that. Honestly, I was in shock. I did not expect her to circle back to that, but there it was. It was not an apology, but it sounded like an acknowledgement that maybe I was not the monster they had all imagined. Since then, things have been much quieter. I do not hear anything from her family anymore, and it seems like we have reached a new level of understanding. We might not agree on everything, but we have both accepted our roles in the kids' lives. And frankly, I think it has made me a better father because I am no longer constantly second-guessing every decision, wondering how it will affect her household. I just focus on what is best for my twins. In the end, this whole situation taught me something important. Sometimes setting boundaries is not just about saying no to others. It is also about saying yes to your own peace of mind. I learned that it is okay to prioritize your own family without feeling guilty. And if others do not understand, that is their problem, not mine. Today, things are good. The twins are happy, and so am I. And I feel like we are finally moving forward without all that unnecessary baggage. I clearly laid down my boundaries, and I think everyone, even Brianna and her husband, eventually respected them. It is not perfect, and there will surely be more bumps in the road. But at least now, I know I can hold my ground and make the decisions that are best for my family without losing myself in other people's expectations. Update. A few weeks after things had finally settled down, I thought I was done with the demands. But Brianna came back at me with something new. She started talking about the twins' living conditions at her place, saying there was not the same comfort as at my house. At first, I thought she was just complaining until she started implying that I should fix it. In reality, she wanted me to buy a house, not for me, but for them. She said it was not fair for the kids to go from one standard of living to a completely different one, and that it could damage their self-esteem if they felt like they were lacking things at her place. I sat there trying to figure out if she was serious. She totally was. She genuinely expected me to buy a second home for the kids to live in when they are with her, and for her to live in too. All at my expense. I tried to stay calm, but I had to ask her how that made any sense at all. You already have a place to live. She launched into a speech explaining that their house was too small for a family of that size, and that it affected the kids' mental well-being. She was talking about an equivalent standard of living again, as if I had to compensate for all the choices she had made since our separation. When I told her it was not happening, she pulled out every guilt trip in the book. She asked if I did not want the kids to feel as comfortable at her place as they do at mine. And she said it was unfair that I was not willing to ensure their entire living environment. She was making me look like a heartless jerk because I refused to buy a new house for her family. At this point, I had had enough. I told her, "Look, the twins have everything they need at your place. If you think they need a bigger house, that is something you and your husband have to manage. I am not responsible for upgrading your housing." She was quiet for a moment, then she fired back. "Well, if the kids end up feeling like their real home is only with you, it will be your fault." I simply shook my head, and the conversation ended there. I do not know how she could have thought that demand was reasonable. I want the best for my kids, but that does not mean I am going to buy her a whole new lifestyle. I guess there is no limit to what she is willing to ask for, but at least now everything is crystal clear to me. Comment: I really connected with this story on a personal level. It reminds me how valuable setting healthy boundaries truly is. I believe that taking care of your children and prioritizing your peace come first. Being kind doesn't mean you have to say yes to every request. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is protect your own energy. I hope this encourages you to examine the boundaries in your own relationships. Choosing peace over trying to make everyone happy can be incredibly freeing. Your self-respect and mental well-being are worth standing up for. Letting go of guilt that isn't yours is an important part of healing. Thank you for watching and sharing this journey with me. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.